You open PowerShell on a fresh Windows 11 laptop, type ssh-admin at server, and it works. Good. Then you open Ubuntu in WSL, run the same command, and it asks for a password or says your key does not exist. Then VS Code works from one terminal but not the other. Nothing mysterious is happening. You are using 2 SSH installations with 2 homes, 2 config files, and often 2 agents. Today, we clean that up so Windows, PowerShell, OpenSSH, and WSL behave predictably. Windows 10 and Windows 11 include the OpenSSH client on current supported builds. That means SSH, SCP, SFTP, ssh-keygen, and ssh-add are available directly from PowerShell or command prompt, without PuTTY. The OpenSSH server, SSHD, is an optional Windows capability you can install when you want the Windows machine to accept SSH logins. PowerShell is not a different SSH product. It is just the shell launching Microsoft's packaged OpenSSH binaries. The useful part is consistency. Host aliases, identity files, port forwarding, known hosts, and most day-to-day commands follow the same OpenSSH rules you use on Linux. On native Windows, your per-user SSH directory is under your Windows profile, c:/usersu:/ssh. The client config file is c:/usersu:/ssh-config, and known hosts and private keys usually live beside it. The Windows Authentication Agent is a Windows service named ssh-agent. If that service is stopped or disabled, ssh-add will not store your key for future sessions. WSL is different. An Ubuntu shell under WSL has its own Linux file system, its own home/u:/ssh directory, its own OpenSHM package, and its own idea of file permissions. Same commands, same protocol, separate operating environments. Walk the card from the top. Get command SSH tells you which SSH executable PowerShell will run. That matters if old tools or Git bundles changed your path. SSH-V prints the OpenSSH version. Get service SSH agent shows whether the Windows agent service exists and whether it is running. The sc.exe line sets that service to start automatically at boot. Note the space after start equals is required by sc.exe syntax. Start service SSH agent starts it now. After that, ssh-add can talk to the Windows agent instead of asking for your key passphrase in every new PowerShell window. Here is the ordinary admin pattern. In PowerShell, open your Windows SSH config with Notepad using the path on screen. Create a host alias named fileserver. HostName is the real DNS name or IP address. User is the account you want on that remote system. Save the file. Now SSH fileserver expands to ssh-alias at fso1.lan. Using your normal Windows OpenSSH behavior, known hosts checking, identity selection, agent use, and any defaults you have configured. This is the same idea as Linux or Mac OS. The location changed, the client language did not. The common mistake is editing the Windows config and expecting WSL to use it. It will not. WSL reads /homeu.ssh.config unless you deliberately point it somewhere else. Another mistake is dragging private keys between Windows and WSL through shared folders and breaking permissions. OpenSSH may reject keys that are readable by too many principals. If you install the Windows OpenSSH server, treat it as a real remote access service. Patch the host, restrict who can log in, prefer keys over passwords, review the firewall rule, and monitor authentication logs. Convenience is not a substitute for access control. This episode sits between basic client usage and deeper configuration. We already care about identity files, host aliases, and known hosts. On Windows, the commands are familiar, but the operating system plumbing changes. Services instead of systemd for the agent, Windows profile paths instead of Linux home paths, and optional features instead of packages for SSHD. Later in the series, we will harden SSHD config, centralize authorized keys, log and alert on failed authentication, and automate client config. The foundation is knowing which SSH you are running and which config it is reading. Take 5 minutes on your own Windows machine or a lab VM. First, in PowerShell, run ssh-V and record the version. Check Get Service SSH Agent and start it if you plan to use key passphrases regularly. Open c:/users.u.ssh config and add one harmless alias for a system you administer, even if it is only a lab VM. Then open WSL and run WSL ssh-V, or run ssh-V inside the Linux shell. List ssh/ssh there. Notice whether it contains different keys and config. That observation prevents hours of confusion. 3 beats to keep. First, current Windows 10 and 11 systems ship with a native OpenSSH client, so PowerShell can be a first-class SSH workstation. Second, Windows config lives under c/users-u.ssh config, while WSL has its own linux.ssh directory and does not automatically share your keys. Third, ssh-agent on Windows is a service. Check it, start it, and decide whether it should start automatically. Tomorrow we keep building SSH from the admin side. New SSH episode daily on this channel, plus the daily ranked CVE brief for defenders who patch with priorities.